Tanner's pick, that being the 2009 film Watchmen. Please tell us about this 3-hour movie.
Dude, holy cow, I'm so excited to talk about Watchmen. I love Watchmen so much. Watchmen is the story, it's like an alternate history, basically, where people get inspired by the Superman comics to actually go out and be vigilantes. And we witness the story as of 1985, where we have our collection of retired vigilantes, one of whom is Rorschach, who is slowly discovering a plot, which involves killing off a bunch of the, superheroes and whatever. And as the plot is unraveled, we discovered it is actually a plan by one of the former heroes, Ozymandias, to detonate a bunch of nukes all over the world in order to stop the Cold War and unite the world against a common threat. In this case, the common threat being him framing the only super-powered individual in the world, Dr. Manhattan.
Insane. Dude, what was your haiku for this one?
Dude, here's my haiku as inspired by Watchmen. Where did I write that down? Dude, here we go. The world on the brink. The comedian is dead. What does justice mean? So, Watchmen is basically custom made for me and my interests. Yeah,
that's what I was saying during the movie.
Yeah, it involves a lot of politics, history. It's got the United States versus communism in there, philosophy, vigilantism, alternate history shit. Just like pretty much everything that I am interested in as a person. So like, I am very biased in favor of this film, obviously, and I've read the comics and like them.
Yeah, you were so hyped for this movie that you started rereading the comics just so that you could be prepared for this.
Mm-hmm. And how were they, dude? Is the comic better?
Yes, but I don't think it's better in a way where like the movie like fucks up the story or anything. It's just like a lot of stuff has to be truncated just by virtue of it being a movie. Like, one thing I was commenting on is like the opening credits of the movie is like an insane amount of world building that gets much more fleshed out in the comic, obviously. Like, it basically shows the entire history of how we go from an identical 1940s to us to how we wind up with their alternate version of 1985. So, the comic goes more in depth into stuff like that. I will say, the biggest difference between the movie and the comic is the ending. And I think the movie actually does it better, because what the ending is Ozymandias' big plan is he's going to nuke a bunch of cities, frame Dr. Manhattan for it, and that'll unite the world against Dr. Manhattan, thus averting nuclear war. His plan, his end goal is the same in the comics in that he's trying to avert nuclear war, but what he does in the comics is he genetically engineers a giant tentacle monster with psychic powers, which he teleports into the middle of New York, and when it dies, it unleashes a giant psychic blast, killing millions of people. And then the world unites against this, like, alien invasion threat.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that the movie plot is much better. Because it's less out of nowhere, because we know Dr. Manhattan, and it makes more sense to frame Dr. Manhattan, and it lines up much more neatly with the fear being nuclear war that he would fake these nuclear attacks.
Yeah. But at the same time, Tanner, this is like an insanely polarizing film generally.
Right.
Why the fuck is that exactly? Like, why are there some people who just, like, do not like this movie?
I'm really unclear on it myself, actually. I don't want to insult their intelligence too much and say it just seems like they don't really get the idea that you have to cut out a lot of content in order to adapt a book into a movie.
Yeah.
But that does kind of just seem to be all it is. Like, a lot of the...
This wasn't in the era of two-parters.
Right. Yeah, like a lot of the complaints just seem to be, oh, they don't go as in depth into this character or talk about this very much, or they cut this out entirely. It's like, yeah, we're trying to shove a 12-issue comic book into a 3-hour movie. There's gonna be a lot of stuff cut down.
I mean, can't there be an argument for, splitting things up a bit so you can have a more fleshed out film? Like maybe there isn't like clear like story arcs within the comic to do that. Maybe there's just like one continuous story arc and there isn't an easy way to adapt it into, a multiple film series. But with something like that, I feel like it's just to the detriment of the source material if you're going to just have to cut out a large amount of content that audiences would in fact want to know more of but can't without, going and reading the source material.
So the something that immediately makes me think is Alan Moore, the writer of the comic, famously said that he does not think it is possible to adapt comic books into movies. So
hasn't he also said he doesn't like this movie either?
Yeah. But so I guess that's kind of an argument in your favor, but not necessarily in the same way, because he's just saying that no, he basically believes that every piece of media, because it was specifically crafted for whatever its original format was, it cannot be faithfully or even well translated into any other media. Movies will always be best as movies. Things that were meant to be comic books will always be best as comic books, etc., etc.
I disagree. I mean, let's look at fucking Frieren for a moment here. The Frieren manga is cool, obviously. Everyone really likes the Frieren manga. But the anime adapts it really well. It's very faithful to the material, but it also just elevates it to a completely different degree. Like, the art in the manga is really cool and detailed and all that. But the anime does it in, like, its own kind of style of anime with having like the really absurd over-the-top animation and fight scenes with also having like really gorgeous background art and character animation and things like that. Mm-hmm. So it's possible. It just takes a lot of skill to get an adaptation done right. Mm-hmm. Especially one with this kind of format where it's not like really set up to do it. Like, it's kind of unfair to compare, something like a manga to an American comic. And maybe I'm wrong about this because I have like literally no experience with comics. But a lot of the time, manga artists will straight up just write their manga and their stories in a format that would be easy to adapt because they know that it's really common for popular mangas to become adaptations, and that will make them a fuck ton of money. So it's just really easy, especially like their producers will literally tell them to like make things structured in like story arc kind of ways with like really clear dividing lines such that it is easy to adapt things that way into like seasons that are digestible. I don't know if that's how that works in the comic book world.
It's not at all.
Who knows? Then fair enough. It's a hard task. I would say overall, I honestly, without knowing anything about the source material, this movie is kind of messy to me. It's fast-paced, it's really long, it's super dense, and it could have been longer, and I think it would have been better for it, but, maybe to the detriment of being, like, absurdly long. But I think overall, it's a story that is cool and well told, generally speaking. And I think the adaptation succeeds.
I think...
Even though there are quite a bit of flaws due to just the nature of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's entirely dependent on like what people want when it comes to an adaptation. Like, it seems like for a lot of people, it's like, well, I want my comic book, but I want it to be exactly the same. I want it to be beat for beat. Everything is just completely replicated, but now on the screen with people instead of pictures. Which, like, why would you want that?
That works.
That seems very strange overall, I would say. It's like certain concessions have to be made when you're adapting something to a different medium. And, as long as it, serves to, like, better create whatever, like, this new medium is, then it's, like, totally fine, I think. And, those changes had to be made for Watchmen, so, like, whatever, I guess. This film, I feel like, was pretty good, Like, when we were watching, I was like, people really don't like this movie. And it's like, I thought it was great. I enjoyed it a lot. Like, I do think that my biggest problem with it is that a lot of it does feel very meandering. Like, it doesn't feel like a lot of the times it really has a clear vision, and we're kind of just following these characters. And it seems like a lot of the times they forget that, like, the comedian died and they're supposed to be, like, figuring out what the fuck happened there or whatever. Like, at the same time, I still enjoy, like, everything's going on for the most part.
Yeah, I would, before Tanner, you go and defend it, I would also agree with Nico on this point. This is also a big disagreement I have with this film, too, is it does feel like there isn't, like, obviously there is a through line to the film. There's the mystery of, like, who's killing these, these superheroes and why that's happening. But I don't feel like, at least from my perspective, I don't feel like we got enough context clues to actually be, like, super engaged with this through line, and then all coalesce into a really rushed feeling ending for me.
It does feel very rushed.
And it kind of leaves a sour taste in my mouth, or in my mind, I guess, because of that. Where it's all like, I don't really feel like the movie really had a ton of direction with what it wanted to do, and then it all coalesces in a really rushed feeling ending, and it all just kind of feels weird to me. But I still think the whole package is really good, so that's not like a massive detriment to it, even though it is still like the big disagreement I have, I would say.
Yeah.
What I was gonna say as sort of a slight disagreement with you, Nico, is none of our, let me think, I'd say none of our characters particularly care about the comedian. Most of them actively dislike him even. So like the fact that, yeah, they don't really, like, the investigation is really only something Rorschach is really committed to throughout, and the rest of them just kind of hop in and out as they happen to be in the story, kind of reflects that in my mind, where, like, first off, like, Night Owl and Silk Spectre and them, they don't even buy into the mass killer theory until pretty much the end of the movie. And Rorschach's the only one who really cares about finding out the truth. They don't really give a fuck about the comedian or why he died.
That's fair enough, but that also doesn't stop the fact, like, that there isn't, like, a clear through line for a casual watcher then. Because even if that makes sense in the context of, the film, it wouldn't be the best way of structuring it potentially. But of course, also, that might just be an adaptation issue, that there isn't, like, an easy way of, having the film structured in a different way without, like, fundamentally changing the plot structure.
Yeah, so, like, I'll say two more big changes. Not maybe big, but noticeable changes from the comic. One of them, especially, that I think a lot of people complain about, is Dr. Manhattan. In the comic, Dr. Manhattan's whole shtick is that, like, they make a really big deal out of the fact that he perceives his entire, his past, his present, and his future. From his perspective, they are all happening at the exact same time. And as a result, he's, like, basically confused a lot of the time, and he has a hard time, like, taking decisive action. And that's, like, a really big part of the comic, his sort of struggle with that perception of time and what that means. That is a very hard thing to portray in a film, because, like, in a comic book, you can, do the panel system to show, okay, here he is at these different points in his life, but, we know that these are all happening at the same time. That's a bit harder to pull off in a comic or in a movie, and I think the movie definitely does not play up that aspect of his character nearly as much.
Frankly, I don't think they really do it that much at all. If anything, it just kind of feels like he's omnipotent for the most part, and they don't really show the downsides of that perspective. Because I think that's a cool way of doing it, and honestly, I definitely have my gripes with Dr. Manhattan with the way they talk about, like, the future and stuff. Because I was questioning the way the movie was portraying him. Like, if he knows his future, he should know that all of this shit is gonna happen at some point, and they're probably he could pretty easily thwart the main antagonist. Is it just he's, like, so apathetic about it, he just doesn't give a shit, and that's why he didn't stop it? So
it's partially, yes, he's apathetic. They do mention this in the movie through dialogue and whatever, that Ozymandias had figured out a way to sort of counteract his ability to see the future by releasing tachyon particles, which are particles that can travel backwards in time. And so he created tachyon particles while he was initiating his plan that went backwards in time and kind of fucked up Dr. Manhattan's ability to see the future.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I totally missed that part. Or forgot about it. One of the two.
Yeah. And then the other thing is that, like, Rorschach is much more the main character in the comic. Like, he's very much the one we fought. He's like the through line, basically. Like, we get to see a much more driven and sequential story because we are pretty much always following Rorschach, except for the handful of times we'll cut away to other characters to see what they're doing. Like, for example, in the movie, it is Night Owl, I think just by himself, that goes and sees Ozymandias, aka Adrian Veidt, and warns him about the mass killer, or, tells him about the comedian getting killed. In the comic, it's Rorschach that, ends up meeting up with everyone and telling them this information one by one.
Mm-hmm. Which, the fucking, as Jackson was saying earlier, with, the rushed ending, it did just feel very weird how, Rorschach and Owlboy...
Are we saying rushed because it does happen pretty quickly that they go from investigating Ozymandias and then they go, oh, wait, it's actually him, and then they go straight to Antarctica?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was basically exactly what I was going to say. So, you beat me to it, Tanner.
Yeah, with the ending, too, I guess this is just a suspend your disbelief moment, but I find it really hard to believe that the whole world is just going to go through a time of peace because some random fucking nukes basically got set off. And, obviously, yeah, there's a common enemy now, but, is that really going to just make all the world governments chill with each other? I highly, highly doubt that. It's kind of just some fucking, dopey feel-good ending bullshit. Which I still like the, it's not a good ending. I do like that the villain technically won. I think that's cool, but I don't really like the way he won.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It didn't work for me. It just feels kind of stupid.
Okay.
I really liked it when he was monologuing to them, and he told them, "Oh yeah, by the way, did you really think I was just gonna sit here and let you guys even try to stop me or whatever? I set this thing in motion 30 minutes ago."
Yeah. That's a classic all-time line.
Right.
Yeah, I do appreciate this move for how self-aware it is. This is, I would say this is definitely my favorite deconstruction of the superhero genre. And as I'm realizing now, people do this a lot more than I thought they did, deconstruct the superhero genre.
Oh, yeah.
Because the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. I kind of fuck with this. And then I've seen it a bunch of times now, and I'm like, okay, I kind of get it. But this movie definitely has a lot of interesting takes with it. It's straight up not even there's just straight up not even superheroes. They're just normal-ass people that are good at fighting, basically. Which is cool. I think the universe is really cool. I think this movie's really well acted, too. There's some weird CG bullshit going on.
That big fucking elephant blimp or whatever they keep showing.
Yeah, there's some really bad looking shots, but for the most part, I think this is a pretty interestingly shot film, cinematography wise. They've got some unique ways of showing stuff, which is cool. Generally, I would say this is a pretty well produced film.
I'd agree. Fun fact about the elephant: they don't mention this at all in the movie, but because of Dr.
The elephant is God.
No. Because of Dr. Manhattan, existing, we figured out electric cars really early, and so, we see that Hollis, his car shop works on quote-unquote obsolete models. That means he works on gas-powered cars. Because the whole world has transitioned to electric vehicles already.
I see. Interesting. Yeah.
That's what I'm hoping we can get sometime soon. Electric, just self-driving vehicles. Traffic is going to be a thing of the past, boys. I cannot wait for that to happen.
I love traffic. I love getting stuck in highway traffic for hours.
Dude, I'm going to bring up philosophy now.
Okay.
Please do.
So an interesting thing that a lot of people talk about with this series is the way that each of the characters is meant to represent sort of a different philosophy on morality. So Ozymandias, he's meant to represent utilitarianism. So as long as your action produces more good than it does bad, or propagates more happiness than not, then it's morally justified. And obviously we see this with his big plan where he's like, yeah, I killed several million people, but hey, I saved several billion, therefore everything's okay.
Based.
And I think a question they kind of ask with him is does he truly believe in this sort of view of morality, or is he just an egomaniac who thinks he has, for some reason, the right to just impose his will on the world around him? We have...
I'm going to go for the latter, personally.
Yeah, I think, adopting all of these, Greek and Egyptian trappings and, literally calling himself the smartest man in the world, it makes me question his motives a bit, let's say.
Much like how you call yourself the smartest man in the friend group.
True. I never said that about this friend group, by the way. You're borrowing that from some other friend group that you're not a part of.
You believe it for this one, too.
True. Night Owl is a pragmatist, which kind of just means, like, pragmatist is kind of like largely utilitarian, but, like, there are lines you shouldn't cross, essentially. A couple of questions I got about Night Owl. Why are he and Rorschach friends?
Because they were co-workers previously, I guess.
Yeah, they go way back.
Right, but like, I don't think it makes much sense for them to be so. They don't seem to particularly get along. They don't seem to particularly like each other, even.
Yeah, it seems like Rorschach has kind of had some screws loose for a while now, too, so you think he kind of just would have cut him off at this point.
This actually does tie into something I wrote much later, but I'll bring it up now. So, like Jackson mentioned, this is sort of a deconstruction of the superhero genre. I think arguably the OG deconstruction. And something I kind of saw is that Night Owl and Rorschach are kind of both deconstructions of Batman, which I find interesting, where it's like, Night Owl is kind of like the man with the resources of Batman, but he doesn't really have the motivations or willpower, that kind of stuff. Whereas Rorschach is kind of like, he does have that sort of driving force of will that Batman has, but he doesn't have the fancy gadgets and whatever. And so it's kind of interesting where it ends up showing, okay, if you have Batman where it's just, you know, the gadgets and stuff, but not the force of will, he's just kind of this, I don't know, spineless, weak-willed guy who, you know, in his own words, seems to be putting on the costume or whatever just to feel some control over his life. Whereas Rorschach, if you have a Batman where it's just like the desire for vengeance and this, you know, very black and white view of morality, you just have this crazy guy that's running around assaulting people, you know?
Yeah, he's very morally gray once you mix that black and white together.
That sentence doesn't make any sense in the context of what I was just saying. You're just saying shit to say shit now.
Dude, Rorschach, he sees the world in black and white. That's what you just said.
Yeah, but why'd you, huh?
He becomes morally gray once you mix
how?
those colors together.
But, like, you don't.
What do you mean?
You don't mix those colors together, though. That's the whole point of the character.
Well, yeah, but he's still morally gray. That's all I'm saying, Tanner.
I think you're wrong.
You don't think he's a morally gray character?
He is like the most morally gray character of all time.
Rorschach is fucking base, dude. He's awesome. There's nothing morally gray about him. He's just correct.
Shut the fuck up. I am going to say that in a second here, but I'm talking about the other characters first, because I find Rorschach the most interesting to talk about. Let me take a sip of my water here.
Rorschach's a fucking Sigma. I love that guy.
He is. The comedian is a nihilist, where, you know, he doesn't give a fuck about anything, so he just kind of does whatever he wants to. But we do see that he kind of has a change of heart at the end of his life with what he's saying to Moloch and whatever. And I'm kind of trying to figure out what exactly we're supposed to take from that. I'm wondering, because, like, I think the two best sort of implications there are, he's kind of come to regret his life because he's like dying alone with no friends and family, and he's like ostracized from his biological daughter and whatever.
Yeah, it's definitely how I took it.
Or, and I think this is maybe the more interesting take, he sort of, he does discover Ozymandias's plot. I'm wondering if he was kind of shocked into conscious because he was kind of going through the world where he's like, okay, I am intentionally choosing to have no moral code, so I don't care that I'm committing all these evil deeds. But then he discovers this plan and he goes, oh, this guy has a moral code, and yet he is going to commit far more evil than I ever would have. Nothing? Okay, moving on to the next character.
No, I have nothing for that one.
Okay.
I gave you my 2 cents already and you rejected it.
I didn't reject it, though. I agreed with you. I'm the one who said it first. And then, yeah, Dr. Manhattan, he's... they don't do a great job with doing this in the movie, but he's essentially predetermination, where, he kind of just believes that he isn't truly in control of his actions, and he's just going through the motions effectively. Something funny about Dr. Manhattan, I just find it funny how he kind of changes his mind about humanity, because Obviously, the monologue is better in the comic, but in the movie, it kind of just boils down to, wait a second, your mother fell in love with her own rapist? Damn, you're right, humans are crazy, or whatever the fuck. And he's like, you know what, I will save them then.
Which, by the way, he didn't even rape her in this movie. What the fuck was that?
He doesn't successfully rape her in the comic either.
Oh.
Yeah.
I feel like it kind of loses a bit of something.
Bummer!
Yeah, it's just an attempted rape, and he gets stopped by Hooded Justice in both of them.
Which, is still bad, obviously, but, like, I feel like it does lose some impact by not going all the way there.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe the author was like, well, I do want to have this sort of morally complicated situation where she still loves him, and if I did have him rape her and then she still fell in love with him, that'd be, like, extra hard to defend.
Yeah.
So like, oh, Laurie, he only tried, he didn't really do nothing, or whatever the fuck. Okay, finally, we're reaching Rorschach, the big man himself. He's obviously meant to represent sort of the Kantian categorical imperative, which is a fancy series of words that just means some actions are wrong no matter the context. And yeah, the thing with Rorschach is he's objectively right the entire movie. He's the only one that gives a fuck about any of the problems the entire time. And he's the only one trying to find solutions to this shit. And, when he's marching out into the snow to go tell the world the truth about what Ozymandias had done, that's just the right thing to do. So
never compromise, even in the face of Armageddon.
Yeah, exactly. So go ahead and give me your guys' argument for why I should think that black and white morality is wrong or something.
I don't think it's wrong. I think Nico's just saying that he's a gray character morally because, he, like, attacks the cops and shit, and that's not a good thing to do, generally.
That was self-defense, though. Therefore, morally right.
Self-defense?
Yeah. He was being framed, and they were gonna arrest him.
He should have gone through the legal process,
Yeah, he should have talked it out with them.
He should have came out with his hands up, and nobody would have gotten hurt.
But they had already been hunting him down for years. They had a score to settle.
Yeah, because he's been doing illegal stuff.
Maybe I respect the laws of God than the laws of man, huh?
I guess that's a potential defense there, I suppose.
I will say, so like, both Zack Snyder, director of the movie, and Alan Moore, writer of the comic, have both said that you're supposed to think that Rorschach is essentially, like, wrong and the bad guy.
Yeah.
But every time I listen to interviews of these guys where they talk about that, they never point to anything about the ideology itself you're supposed to disagree with. They will just point to...
They just say, he's a nut job, look at this guy.
Exactly. They just point to these superficial character traits. They won't even say the nut job one. I remember an interview with Alan Moore where he just goes, he's short, ugly, and stinky. Why would you ever want to be him? I'm like, that doesn't make him wrong, though.
Dude, haven't you ever watched a Disney movie before? Ugly characters are wrong.
Exactly.
They're the bad guy.
Like, it's the laziest, most superficial way of, like, trying to disprove an idea. And I think the problem Alan Moore ran into is that he wrote a character with an ideology he disagrees with, but he wrote the character so that they were internally consistent with that ideology, and that ideology is correct and his is wrong, and he doesn't know how to square those two things in his mind.
Consider this, Tanner. Rorschach hates the gays.
And that's a point in his favor.
Fair enough, dude.
And also, like even if we're like, yeah, he's homophobic, but like, we never see him like assault gay people or anything. We only see him beat up evildoers and the police. So
Some may say they're one and the same.
He does attack Ozymandias though because he thinks he's gay. I mean, that's not why he's doing it, but he does think he's gay.
Right. Let's see, what other... I'm done with the character analysis. Let's see, banger soundtrack. You all agree.
The times they are changing, for sure.
The times they are changing.
I cannot remember anything from the soundtrack of this
film.
They had
99 love balloons.
They sure did. Here's a question for you guys. In the movie studio, when Dr. Manhattan had his freak out, did you guys interpret that as him killing all those people?
No, I assumed he was just teleporting them away randomly.
Yeah, same
somewhere.
here.
Yeah, that is true. They have a line in the comic where it says, yeah, they showed up in an empty parking lot. I don't think they had a line in the movie at all, so
I don't think they did either.
Yeah, so I think it's left a bit ambiguous in the movie for some reason, but... Well, actually, I guess if you're going... Since you changed the end plan where he is framing Dr. Manhattan, that actually does make more sense to leave it kind of ambiguous in that phase. So, fair play, Zack Snyder. A very minor element of the movie and the comic is the existence of the New Frontiersman newspaper. This is like supposed to be a right-wing newspaper. Rorschach loves it, you know, and it's a poorly done critique that doesn't make any sense. Essentially, like, when this was written in 1986, it's sort of bemoaning the rise of, like, politically biased and sensationalistic news sources, which Alan Moore blames on, like, right-wing news. But, like, biased news sources did not start in the 80s. Like, it's just a wild thing to believe and blatantly not true.
Yeah, so when did they start then, huh, tough guy?
The thing, news has always been politically biased. It's just that, like, when we made the jump to television news, all of the channels initially were all had a left-wing bias, but since they all had the same bias, we just assumed that was the center. So as soon as we started adding news sources that had a right-wing bias, those look extreme from a center that was itself not actually in the center. And then, you know, I just randomly write down that there's inspiration from Doctor Strangelove in this movie, but not an important detail, but I noticed it. Have either of you guys seen that movie?
No.
Never mind then.
Speaking of people who've seen movies, though, let's hear Dylan's thoughts on this one.
Alright, so next here for the review, I've got Watchmen. This was a 3-hour movie, and I was kind of dreading the fact of the length of the movie. Luckily, the length of the movie has nothing to detract from how good the movie was. I thought it was sufficient. I do think there was... So I'll immediately go back on the second. I do believe there were some empty areas in the movie where there was kind of just nothing going on, or maybe some unimportant things. I remember Tanner saying this was like the director's cut, so that kind of makes sense. But I liked the environment, I liked the world building, I liked the plot. It took me a while to figure out that this was kind of a superhero-esque movie, but I guess to say it's a vigilante movie is probably more accurate. Favorite character is Rorschach. I thought his character throughout the whole thing was very, very cool, and I like how they explored all the different characters and, you know, how they evolve over time, and, you know, really what's going on behind the scenes. And, you know, I'm not super big into politics, so, you know, maybe this movie made more sense to other people. But no, I mean, yeah, I thought the motivations of this movie were quite interesting. I think I talked with Jackson about it. I don't necessarily like the ideas, or really even the movies, where there's a person who thinks that the betterment for the world is to kill a lot of people or something. And we went more in depth with that. I'm sure Jackson will say something. It's just like a weird plot push that I particularly don't like. I think it's kind of a weak, cliche way of doing it. But overall, acting was really good. You know, effects were really good. Just, I liked a lot of aspects of this movie. I thought it was very good. Kind of just like a Batman-esque movie. And I don't know whether this is DC or Marvel. I'm sure I'll find out when this episode comes out. But yeah, no, amazing movie. Thought it was very good. Just the length of it, and, you know, just maybe just some missed connections for me. But yeah, I thought Watchmen was an A+.
Wow, that guy liked this movie.
Did
Shocking,
he like it?
Isn't it? You did like it.
Okay, that's good. I would have thrown a cat, let's say.
And speaking of how much you liked it, do we have anything else to say about this one?
What the fuck with Night Owl and the woman? I didn't really care for them as characters that much, to be completely honest.
Yeah, same here.
Especially Night Owl. He was kind of a nothing burger for me. I mostly gave a shit about this movie when it was Blue Dude and Funny Guy on screen.
Yeah.
Which one's Funny Guy?
Funny Guy being not the comedian, but being
yeah, it's an important distinction there.
Right. Shooting pregnant Vietnamese women, based or cringe?
Cringe, dude.
Okay.
Cringe. He's kind of a piece of shit.
Yeah. Unpopular opinion. Also, by the way, for a guy called The Comedian, he wasn't exactly very funny throughout this movie.
It's more of a satire.
Oh, okay. Speaking of satire, so, are we ready to get onto the rankings here?
Yes, I've said my piece.
Fantastic, dude. Dylan's ranking for Watchmen is an A+. Tanner, you gonna one-up him there?
Yeah, I'm gonna give it an S+.
Sounds about right. Jackson, how about you, dude?
Yeah, so like I was alluding to with my review, I think this is a good movie overall. I enjoyed it, but I do think it's pretty messy. I think some of the characters are really cool. I don't know. I'm probably going to rate this one higher later, but I'm shooting low to start with. I gave it an A-.
God damn it, Jackson. I'm also getting an A-.
Holy cow.
I thought you were going to be like, ooh, I don't know, like a B, I guess.
No, I even with all of my gripes with this film, it would pain me to put this anywhere in the B tier. I think it deserves an A- at the very minimum.
Yeah, I agree.
But I could see myself rating this higher. And that puts it at an A+ overall.
Wow. That's a good...
It didn't break into S tier, unfortunately.
That's still a good rank, though, you know?
Yeah, this was a blowout week in terms of quality here, inside of one film in particular.
Yeah, we got one good one. Hopefully, we'll be able to do a little better next week.